Good afternoon. My name is Jasmine Sanders, and this session we're going to be talking about planning for effective instruction and what does effective instruction look like in a middle school class. I want to begin this presentation with a quote from Harry Wong, and the quote reads, "The single greatest effect on student achievement is not race, it is not poverty, but it is the effectiveness of the teacher." So we're going to look then at how it is that teachers know, or how teachers know when they're being effective, and what does effective instruction look like in the classroom. Student achievement is the overall goal for everything we do in the classroom. And sometimes we tend to, consider things like race, attendance, socioeconomic background, all of those things when we're talking about how effective or how successful a student can be. But here during this presentation, we're going to focus on the teacher and what it is that the teacher can do in the classroom to help the students experience success. We're going to begin, of course, by listing out our objectives and what it is we want you to walk away with from this session. So by the end of this session, all participants should have a clear understanding of some of the components, not all of them, that make up an effective middle school math classroom. Some of the questions that we're going to address here is, who is the effective teacher? What are some of the skills, the characteristics of an effective teacher? We're then going to talk about how a school can support their teachers and what does effective instruction look like in your classroom? And then last, we're going to assess our instruction so that we can determine whether or not it is we're being effective. Okay, so let's begin by talking about how the school supports the teacher's efforts. In order for teachers and students to be successful, they must receive sufficient support from school leaders and the school itself. It is the responsibility of the school to provide a certain level of safety and order, and collegiality and professionalism. Although all of these factors here are necessary, they are not what Marzano would consider to be sufficient. That means that they will not solve the problem alone, and they usually tend to level out at some point. So no matter how much effort you put into school safety or collegiality, student achievement is not necessarily guaranteed to improve. Marzano did say, though, however, that if a school provides the teachers with a guaranteed and viable curriculum, that the students will experience success. So what exactly is guaranteed and viable curriculum? Let's just break it out into the two individual words. A guaranteed curriculum is a curriculum that no matter who teaches it or who teaches the given course or subject area, all students will be adequately exposed to certain important topics. Okay, and then we're going to move on to the second part of this concept, and that is a viable curriculum. A viable curriculum is one where the content you are supposed to cover can be covered in the amount of time made available to teachers. In Marzano's discussion of viability, he discusses why it is important for schools to strategically choose which parts of the curriculum the teachers will cover and which parts are quote-unquote viable. Now that we've just talked about how it is that we expect the school to support us as teachers in implementing an effective classroom, we want to now move to talking about what it is, or the characteristics of the teachers, the skills, the qualities, and the abilities that it takes to become an effective instructor, an effective teacher. So according to Hoy, having what we call pedagogical content knowledge is important. And this means that a teacher is able to combine mastery of academic content with knowledge about how to teach that content. And they are able to match instruction to student differences. The example that Hoy and Hoy gives to describe a teacher that has strong pedagogical content knowledge is when a teacher is able to take a student's wrong answers and see them as a way to help the student improve their work. They are able to identify the misunderstandings or lack of information behind each mistake and determine the best way to correct the student's errors. Which materials they are to use which activities they should put in place, and how to test to find out whether or not their reteaching was successful. Looking back to see what has worked and what has not worked, to determine how effective your instruction is all a part of what we would call, or Hoy and Hoy would call, being a reflective practitioner. Reflection is the process of consistently trying to understand and improve your work with your students. Another characteristic of an effective teacher is a teacher's ability. Another characteristic of an effective teacher is one that has to deal with pedagogical content, and that is the ability to teach with clarity. Teachers who know more make clearer presentations and tend to be less vague in their explanations. Teachers who provide clear presentations and explanations tend to have students who learn more. Knowledgeable teachers are not only clear, but they're also very organized. Good organizational skills are noticeable in many areas of your classroom. An organized teacher is able to manage their time, they're able to manage their space, and all the while managing their classroom behavior. Being organized also helps a teacher with what we call withedness, being all-knowing, knowing everything that's going on in the classroom, and the students know that you know what's going on in your classroom. In addition to these things, being organized, with it, and teaching with clarity, we also want the teacher to teach with enthusiasm, and we want the teacher to be committed. Okay, so enthusiastic teachers are needed, or enthusiasm is a quality of an effective teacher. So is commitment. You have to be committed to what you do. This has to be more than a job for you in order for you to be an effective teacher. And last but not least, we want you to be warm, caring, and respectful. This reminds me of an old saying that I've heard before, and the saying goes, students don't care much about what you know until they know how much you care. Danielson reminded us that when students think back and remember their teacher, the one thing that they remember the most is how the teacher treated them. So it is very important for teachers to create an environment where students feel safe, valued, and respected. The climate of the classroom must be free from intimidation and fear. If a teacher is able to build a rapport with their students based on these things, students are very likely to experience success. So now, this is our list of the qualities that we have come up with, or that I have come up with, of an effective teacher. I want you to get with one of your neighbors and come up with 3 additional characteristics that we can add to this list. We'll take about 3 minutes to share. Okay, now that we've shared out what our additional characteristics of an effective teacher are, we're now going to try to apply what it is we've discussed so far. We've talked about how it is a school can support a teacher, and then we talked about some of the qualities and skills that teachers hold that make them an effective teacher. So now let's begin to apply it. And we're going to I'm going to talk a lot about Springboard because that is the curriculum that we use at our school here. And Springboard has lots of teaching and learning strategies that I'm going to pull into my presentation. Okay, so let's begin with the teaching strategies. Springboard, as you know, is not the traditional skill-based instruction that even I was used to when I started teaching. And when Springboard is implemented correctly, the program pushes the students past their comfort zone. Students walk away knowing the information, not only knowing the information, but able to apply it and to communicate their understanding of the concepts. So for this session, I have selected a few strategies that I thought would be best to help you begin transforming your classroom into an effective classroom. The first strategy that I would like to discuss is what Springboard calls interactive word walls, but what Marzano discusses as the student's ability to make sense of abstract academic vocabulary. Now, the word wall, an interactive word wall, is simply a display of vocabulary words that serve as a classroom reference of words or groups of words as they are introduced, used, and mastered over the course of the year. So your word wall, you may choose to leave up your word wall for a unit. You may leave it up for the semester or the entire year. Certain lessons, you may choose to switch out your word wall as you switch from lesson to lesson, but it's just simply there as a reference for the classroom. And it provides a visual reference of a new concept. It aids in understanding for reading and writing. So if you have some writing activities, and there are a lot of writing activities in Springboard, even in the math class, the word wall is there to help. The next strategy that I would like to discuss is called close reading. And close reading is where you read the text word for word, sentence by sentence, line by line, in a more detailed analysis of the meaning. Close reading is, you're probably thinking, if you're thinking, well, why would we use that particular strategy in math? Well, in the Springboard textbook, you'll notice that there's a lot of words. There's a lot of word problems, project-based learning, where the students are expected to understand what they're reading. So the close reading strategy is a very, very necessary strategy for the teachers to use in their math classrooms or any classroom. These are strategies that can be used no matter what the subject is. The next strategy that I would like to discuss is paraphrasing. And again, this is one of those strategies that you've probably used first in an English language arts classroom, a reading class, but we're going to transfer that over to our math class. And paraphrasing in math is just as it is in science or any of your other literacy-based courses. Paraphrasing is restating in your own words the essential information in a text or problem description, and it assists the students with comprehension and recalling of information so that they are able to solve the problems. Now, the next one, marking the text. Although I've seen vocabulary word walls or interactive word walls in classrooms, close reading I've used a little bit. It wasn't necessarily called close reading. Paraphrasing, of course, we're familiar with, but marking the text is one that I was not familiar with until I began teaching Springboard. Marking the text involves highlighting, underlining your text to focus in on key information to help the students understand the text and resolve the problem. You can use your marking the text while you're doing close reading, while you're helping, or as the students are asked to paraphrase. And again, this is just another one of the strategies that help the student or the reader understand or identify the important information in the text. And it's also a great way to help them begin to learn how to take notes. Okay, now the last strategy, or the next strategy that I want to, next teaching strategy, is one where Marzano discussed, and it's called task rotation strategy. And it's much like workshops that we're used to. And at our school, we do lots of workshops in the lower grades, in the elementary classrooms. But in the upper levels where we have Springboard, 6th grade and up, we use what we call, we use the workshops, but here it's called the task rotation strategy. And all that simply means is that the teachers are able to differentiate instruction in smaller groups, and every group is busy or working on something, whether the task is a group assignment with the other members in the group, an independent assignment where they're doing some independent practice. There may be a group of students that are working with the teacher on some skills that they may not have understood or picked up on during the lesson. So task rotation strategy is used school-wide, but it may be called different things, but it still is used school-wide. Okay, now I'm going to move on and talk about learning strategies. These are strategies that students can do when they hit a roadblock, when they're stumbling over their work. We expect them to pick up on certain strategies that are used to help them get out of that particular rut, where this and teacher will kind of just stand to the side and guide and facilitate the learning. The first strategy that we're going to talk about here is creating a plan. Creating a plan simply means that the student will analyze the task in a problem and create a process for completing the task. The process may include interpreting the data, choosing how to solve the problem, communicating the results, and then verifying the accuracy of those results. Creating a plan helps the student break the task or the problem or whatever it is they're working on into smaller parts, and it helps them identify the steps needed to complete the entire task. Okay, the next learning strategy is called creating a representation. Creating a representation is similar to creating a plan, except you're going to use pictures and tables and charts, graphs, equation models, or even verbal expressions. You may choose to represent the the task in a different way than it's presented. Creating a representation helps organize the information and helps the learner to use it in multiple ways so that they can come up with a solution to the problem. Creating a plan, creating a representation can all be used hand in hand with manipulatives. Manipulatives are just objects that we use to examine relationships between the information given. Manipulatives can consist of rulers, manipulatives like calculators or tools. Those are tools. Manipulatives and tools used in the classroom, would be those would be some examples of those things. Manipulatives also, just like the representation that they're creating, it helps to create a visual for the student that helps support comprehension of the information of a problem leading to a solution. Constructing arguments. Constructing arguments is the next strategy that I would like to discuss, and this one is a very important one as it forces the students to think a little more, to consider other perspectives, and basically they use their mathematical reasoning to present assumptions about mathematical situations, to support conjectures with mathematically relevant and accurate data, and to provide logical progression of ideas leading to a conclusion that makes sense. That's a key part in constructing arguments. This particular strategy helps the students to develop the process of evaluating mathematical information. It helps develop their reasoning skills, and it enhances their communication skills while they're supporting conjectures and conclusions. So these are just some of the learning strategies that I want to share with you. There are many more, and I really encourage you to go out and research some more of these strategies to see which ones you may be already using in your classroom, to see which ones you can add to the list of strategies that you have in your classroom. Okay, now that we've gone over the teaching strategies and the learning strategies, we now want to look and see what this effective or evidence, we want to look for evidence of effective instruction. So if someone comes into your classroom to observe your classroom, what is it exactly that they'll see? And of course, this evidence is going to be twofold. There are going to be things that the teacher will be doing and that the student will be doing. And the things that we should look for in teachers are, we should find teachers reinforcing efforts. When the students are trying, whether they're successful in their attempts at solving the problems or not, we want the teachers to be enforcing their efforts, providing them guidance, helping them, giving them little hints and clues, or, asking probing questions, offering feedback, whether the students, answered correctly or not. We want to praise them. We want to celebrate, and again, reinforce their efforts. And then posing challenging questions. I think I kind of got ahead of myself and stated that already, but we do want you to, as a teacher, to be posing challenging questions to help the students or to redirect them when needed. And while this is going on with the teacher, the students will be actively engaged, of course, whether it's with peers in the classroom or just really focusing on what it is you've asked them to do, so that they can, complete the task. We want them to be able to make connections, to be making connections. We want them not to just see the work as busy work, or we want them to get out of the mentality of, I'm completing this for a grade, or what is my grade going to be. But we want them to be able to connect what it is they're working on, what it is you've taught them with their everyday surroundings, with the life around them, with the real world. And sharing ideas and collaborating. I know sometimes, you think if you walk, or it used to be when I began teaching, when you walk into a classroom, if the classroom is quiet, that's an effective instructor. However, that's no longer the case. I had my principal, or the former executive director of our school, she would use the terms, as long as there's some method to the madness. So if you walk into the classroom and the students are just engaged and sharing, and it's a little noisy or whatever, as long as you understand that what's going on, as long as the students understand what they're supposed to be doing and they're busy collaborating and working toward or on their assignment, then that level of disarray, for lack of a better word, is okay. Okay, and then we are going to see the students using manipulatives. We're going to see them, using tools, measuring with rulers, and calculating with calculators, looking for patterns with the calculators. A lot of times that, we don't use the calculators simply as quick fixes, or cheat ways. A lot of math teachers I know forbid calculators in their classroom because they want the students to memorize this, but calculators are useful tools in the classroom. So these are things that you will see when you walk into an effective classroom. Or into a classroom where effective instruction has taken place. These are the things that you will see your teachers doing, and then there are things that you will see the students doing. Okay? And so now I want to take a few scenarios. I'm going to do about 3 scenarios, and I'm going to 3 sets of scenarios, 3 pairs, and I want you to help me identify which scenario it is that demonstrates effective instruction. Okay? Let's look at scenario A. Scenario A says, students are acting out a problem in front of the class. Others in the class participate in the discussion of the problem. All right? And then we have scenario B, where students are in groups. One student in the group works out the problem while the others closely observe. Which of these scenarios is an example of effective classroom instruction, and why? We want you to take just a minute, about 30 seconds at the most, because I don't think it's that difficult, to talk with your partner about which one of these scenarios is effective, demonstrates effective classroom instruction. I'm sorry. All right. So if you chose A as your answer, that is correct. Students in scenario A all the students in scenario A are actively engaged in what's going on. They are participating. We have the students who are acting it out, and then we have the other students who aren't necessarily acting it out, but they are discussing the problem. So all of the students in the classroom here are engaged in what is going on, and that's what we want to see in an effective classroom. The opposite, the other scenario, scenario B, the students are in groups, but only one individual in the group is actually doing the work, and the other participants are passive learners, passive participants, and they aren't getting much out of watching someone else do the work. It doesn't say that any discussion is going on, and that's not exactly what we want to see in our effective classrooms. Let's look at another scenario, and in this scenario, students are using algebra tiles to build equations, and then B, the teacher is showing his students how they can use a formula to easily derive at an answer. So we have one scenario where the students are working with manipulatives, and then we have another scenario where the teacher is giving them a quick fix to finding an answer, a little quick way. Which scenario do you think is an example of effective classroom instruction? And if you chose A, then you are correct again. A is the correct answer. Now let's move on to the next scenario where we have students have been given a worksheet to practice graphing ordered pairs, and students are creating a graph that charts the route of a cross-country trip. Which one of these would you expect to see in an effective classroom? And if you chose answer B, then you are correct. The students here are using their real world life examples to connect them with their math lesson for the day, and that's exactly what we want the students to be able to do, is make connections. Okay, so now let's talk about what effective assessment would look like, because now that we understand what effective instruction looks like in the classroom. We've gone over some evidence and some examples there. We talked about the learning strategies and the teaching strategies, but now how are we going to assess the students to see if our instruction was truly effective or not? And the things that we want to make sure are in place is we want to first make sure that our assessments are aligned to the goals. Formal and informal, formative and summative assessments are all good. And we've discussed some of these already, even though we weren't calling them necessarily assessments. Exit tickets are good assessments for students, not necessarily something they would get a grade on, but the assessment, remember, is just designed to help you know that the students have learned what it is or mastered the content that you were teaching. Assessments don't always have to come in the form of paper pencil, so project-based assessments or even oral assessments, depending on the learner and the student, you have to be in tune with that. Is all important thing that you should remember. Remember that true assessments, true effective assessments, is not about the grade, it's not about the score or even a possible ranking, but it's about improving student achievement and helping them to move forward. Okay? So that concludes our presentation, or my presentation, and at this time I will take any questions or discussion of the content. If not, I thank you for attending this Tuesday teacher training, and you should have a great afternoon.